Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here again after the previous event organized by the GBA. So I'm here this afternoon with a very distinguished panel of subject matter experts, and we are going to discuss, now that we have resolved the funding issues. So let's assume that we have all the resources necessary to engage and to acquire or develop a blockchain solution. Let's discuss how we're going to go about that. So first and foremost, I need to commend Gerard and those who have participated in creating this agenda, because I think there is a very logical sequence between funding, selecting, and as we will see shortly after, also about maturity and evaluation. So given that not all blockchain are the same, they have different features, they have a different performance, they have a different security. Let's hear from this distinguished panel what are their recommendations, what are their experience in doing so. So we have here today with us Paul Dowding, the co-founder and the head of design of L4S. We have Sean Hilton, a document management specialist. We have David Iseminger, who is the CEO of Upheaval and also an author of 12 technological books. And also we have Eugene Morozov that we just heard from the previous panel, who is the founder of the Everscale Academy. So without further ado, let me start with Paul, and I would like to ask each member to introduce themselves and to speak about their specific and practical experience with blockchain solution. Paul.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you to Dino, because he stepped in less than 24 hours notice to help moderate this. So thank you very much, Dino, for this.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And I think Eugene's logging onto his account to see if he got the funding from the last panel. There we go. I'm Paul Dowding, head of design, co-founder of L4S Corporation. We have a layer 1 protocol called Tapestry X. You can go at tapestryx.com. My involvement, we spun out of a boutique consultancy in the financial services. Back in 2015, we were looking at blockchain as a new technology. I saw the potential and of what would be a distributed ledger. But when we looked at it from a process engineering and control, we saw limitations in the performance, the functionality, and ease of adoption, and whether it could be generically applied. And we were hoping, we could work with other protocols to see if they needed to fix some of these problems. There was a lot of energy and activity going on there. So in the end, we turned it back on ourselves and said, okay, how would we solve for those problems? And ended up designing a new kind of layer 1 protocol that actually creates consistency and completeness without mining consensus or independent validators. So it operates in real time, high performance. Interestingly enough, and I'll come back to this on another point, we've got double entry accounting, and we've made it so it's generic, agnostic, and interoperable with legacy infrastructure. So that's my background. My career has been in financial services infrastructure, so I've tried to settle and reconcile trades and payments all over the world. And so blockchain is going to solve all my problems of the last 30 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Please.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Keep talking. Come on.
Oh, okay. Hello. Good afternoon.
Does this one work? Hello, 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 hello.
Is this better? Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Hilton, and I work for the Pure Plays blockchain, and that is the humanizing blockchain, working on transparency and being provably fair, building solutions for everyone. So my background is that I am the document management specialist for Pure Plays, but also I'm a senior developer for Pure Plays as well. A little bit of my background. Before I got into blockchain, I was in the pharma industry for about 15 years. And over the past couple of years, joined up in Pure Plays and have just gotten into the blockchain world So hopefully I can bring some experience in, yeah.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. David?
Great. Hello, everyone. Is this going to work? There we go. So my name is David Iseminger, and my experience that's pertinent to blockchain creation and selection is I have about 20 plus years of experience at Microsoft, where I worked on early operating systems, core operating systems, scalability, protocols, and the like, in order to get early versions of Windows Server running faster and globally scalable. So I spent a fair amount of time with that. I was also a performance analyst, and as Dino mentioned, I've written a handful of books on enterprise infrastructures for computing, on protocols, some on programming and the like. And in terms of the blockchain space, being at Microsoft for as long as I was, I had a view into disruptive technologies and could see the sorts of things that made them come up and disrupt an entire industry, or what made them lose traction and fail. And so when I saw blockchain come along, one of the first things I saw was that this has the power and the capacity and the capability to be disruptive and to really change the things that we do. But an enterprise isn't going to work with anything that isn't going to be scalable, that isn't going to be secure, and isn't going to meet the problems that they have today. So when I saw that, I committed myself to creating and engineering and designing a blockchain that would be able to do those things. And over the course of a while, more than a few months, I will say, designed Ironweave based on a novel patent that we ended up getting that does what we believe is kind of solve the trilemma and kind of see people, reach people in technologies where they are, so that they can get from where they are into this brave new modern world where blockchain can really transform pretty much everything that we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Eugene?
Well, since everybody
In case someone was not here before.
doesn't know me, I'm Eugene Morozov, and I represent Everscale Blockchain. Now, the issue of selecting a particular technology is a critical one for many businesses. If you look at the use cases that companies and government agencies have today, they're very diverse. And if we focus on those that will eventually come to the need of having millions of users using a particular technology concurrently, then the overwhelming majority of blockchains that are available today simply do not qualify. There is no network, blockchain network today that can do 100 million users simultaneously. There will be, though. And in fact, some of the technologies available today are linearly scalable. And this is a critical issue for blockchain selection and adoption. You have to start with your use case, and then you have to understand, you have to decide as to what are the technical parameters that your particular use case requires, right? And one of them I want to stress is linear scalability. The blockchain must have an architecture that would allow you to work with any number of users, as long as you're able to provide a system with enough validators or enough latency, enough network finality, and low enough cost, right? So those are all relevant to the selection. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Eugene. You actually went beyond the introduction and really addressed the question. So thank you very much. And actually also thank you to David, which I think really framed somehow the background of this discussion by mentioning the trilemma. So starting and going back in order with Paul, could you share with the audience, and which we know are here representative from different parts of the spectrum, particularly specific when I think about myself coming from the United Nations, I had this issue at the very beginning of my journey with blockchain design implementation. Looking at this framework and the trilemma and the CAP theorem, what would be the three main recommendations that you will share, you will give to any entity that will thinking and considering embarking in a blockchain acquisition or development?
Well, I'll answer it in two different ways. First of all, you really want to understand why a distributed ledger impacts your use case. You know, what's the commercial advantage? What's the risk reduction, cost reduction? What's the benefit? Then you want to look at the solution to sort of say, why does that particular solution help that use case? And then you want to consider how do you assess the various solutions that may be presented to you. And then it comes down to, again, some of the things I'll tend to repeat, but is it agnostic? Can it apply to multiple use cases? Is it performance to the requirements of your use case? Does it have the functionality and compliance? And then does it meet your business requirements? These are the sort of critical things, the questions that you have to ask. And I'm be remiss if I don't mention it, you all got a copy of the blockchain maturity model when you came in. This is part of the work of the GBA to generate an objective way for buyers of blockchain solutions to assess blockchains and for blockchain providers to measure the maturity of their models. And that's certainly an objective way to do it.
Thank you very much, Paul. And for full disclosure, both Paul and myself, we were co-author of the BMM. So if you hear it repeated many times, it's because we're definitely very close to it, to that development. Thank you so much. So, Sean, from your point of view, what kind of recommendation would you give?
Yes, absolutely, to take a look at your use cases and your requirements and just make sure that the solution matches well with that. One of the things that I'd like to call out, quite important, we talk about decentralization quite a bit. And really, it's important to take a close look at what that really means. So, for example, decentralization has to do with control. Who is in control, how many people are in control of certain aspects. I like to think of 4 modes of control: decision-making, narrative, enforcement, and innovation. So if you're looking at a blockchain solution, and decentralization is quite important, you're going to look at each of these modes of control to see just how decentralized each of them are. These can be handled through governance models in a blockchain solution, how transparent the blockchain is, how you can take a look at the data, how people can pull data from the solution. The consensus model of a blockchain, how decentralized does that look? I know we have proof of stake, we have proof of work and things like this. And new consensus models that are coming out, which all have various levels of decentralization. Also, is it open source? Is it open and free? If it's an open and free blockchain, then that's going to make innovation open for everyone. Anybody can go use the system. They can create their own solutions based on that blockchain. And yeah, so taking a deep look at decentralization, I think, is quite important.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. Very much aligned with exactly also, as Paul alluded, the criteria identifying the BMM, the governance, the transparency, the consensus. So very, very important element. David, from your experience and point of view, what would be your recommendation?
So in the spirit of giving our previous panel congressional aides pithy 3 things, I would say scalability, security, and flexibility. So when you unpack those 3 things, there are all sorts of capabilities that unlocks. So with scalability, you have the ability to do things without concern of outgrowing your solution. With security, you can be assured that the things that you're doing on the blockchain, the information that you're either sharing, creating, or memorializing, if that's your use, is going to be secure and yours to ensure that it is being used the way that you intended. And flexibility enables you to do the things that you want to do rather than conforming to, for example, a specific block size or timing, et cetera. So once you apply those 3 things to your criteria, you can then focus on the creativity that you need to have to create the solutions that's going to be best for you. And I will just also say, if you haven't taken a look at the BMM or read through it, you should, because the strength of that and the means by which that creates a certain level of standard and the thoughtfulness that went into it is great in terms of creating this standard level playing field against which you can measure the effectiveness. So that's a call out to our moderator, because I know you put a lot of time into it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Eugene, anything to add?
Yes, perhaps a couple of things. In addition to the very important and critical criteria mentioned by my colleagues, I would say that any solution has to be environmentally friendly, which essentially disqualifies any proof of work. It's got to be proof of stake or something similar. We really do not want to recommend, energy-consuming applications, and therefore, like the solutions that do not require any extra expenditure of energy would win. The rest was pretty much mentioned: open source, open code, free license, scalability, which is, if we go a little deeper, is reachable through a blockchain architecture, right? You have multi-thread, multi-shard concept, which I'm sure my colleagues are familiar with. And that's something that you can use to simultaneously process a very large number of transactions or messages by splitting your validators into groups, right? As many as you need, as many as your use case actually needs. So that's critical. We talked about decentralization and the various types of protocols. As our previous keynote speaker today, Carol House, mentioned, it's never binary, right? It's never decentralized or centralized in full, right? There's always a degree. So it's important to understand which degree you are comfortable with, right? Which degree of decentralization is sufficient for your use case. And that's not an easy question to answer, right? You really need to look into that. And then, of course, the three technical parameters are equally important: latency, finality, and cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so we have now pretty much identified in positive the element that should be recommended, should be taken into consideration. So vis-a-vis what is available today, we already spoke about the BMM, of course, but trying to go beyond. And here maybe I just also share my personal experience. I'm a former IT auditor. I was responsible for IT auditing at the United Nations for almost 10 years before taking the assignment of Chief Information Officer of the UN Pension Fund, where I designed and implemented a blockchain solution that I will speak more in details tomorrow. And coming from the world of auditing, I was used to work with international standard. So my first point of reference was the HICE organization. And when I contacted them and I asked, what is it available in the domain of blockchain, they basically said to me, well, we are still working on the vocabulary. We are about to issue the document. However, we do have a technical committee, is working on security aspect and so forth and so on. But I really felt the limitation not having a generally accepted and shared understanding of the criteria to be used. So, Paul, from your experience, can you recommend other sources of relevant best practices or recommendation or criteria for the selection, for the adoption of blockchain solution?
In terms of where you're assessing it, I think there's a key thing. We talked about there's limitations of performance. If a consensus algorithm, the computational demands scale exponentially, so they get slower as they get bigger. Anything involving mining or validation is a finite capacity, so you can hit limitations there. So you can look at the performance. And when it comes to functionality, one of the areas which we focused on is you're actually operating a distributed ledger. You're accounting for some actual assets. And so we felt it critical that you build in double entry accounting into the actual distributed ledger. And what the challenge is that how do you account for assets? Blockchain designs in their fundamental are timestamp transfers of ownership. They're not actually ledgers, and they're certainly not GAAP or IFRS accountable, accounting standards. And if you have to run an algorithm against those data sets to generate an output, A, you cannot guarantee the algorithm is correct, and B, the output is no longer part of the immutable record. So you remember, your blockchain is either going to be your primary ledger or a subledger. And if it's a subledger feeding a general ledger, you also need to reconcile. And I often hear people say, well, I've got a blockchain, so I don't need to reconcile it because it's immutable. Well, it's not immutable, it's corruptible, it's corrupt evident. The other thing as well is to do a true reconciliation, you have to tick and tie back. Because even if you're the primary ledger, you have to show a trial balance or balance monitoring. If you're feeding a general ledger, you actually have to be able to prove what's been fed into that general ledger, transaction by transaction. So this is one of the limitations that's happening, that's out there, that's actually preventing these things from doing it. And I think it's one of the future problems because you heard the legal guys talk about a lot of issues. They scratched on the surface of tax reporting, but no one talked about financial regulations or auditing. And these are standards that these ledgers are going to be held to, and it's something you should really focus on.
Thank you, Paul. Definitely, that's one of the questions that I've been asking within my peers, coming again, as I mentioned, from the world of auditing. What does it mean auditing in the world of blockchain? What is the role of the auditors, and what are the criteria to do an audit? So in audit, the ABC of Audit 101 is you have a 5C. You have the criteria, you have the condition, you have the cause, the consequence, and the corrective action. But if we don't have the criteria, we can't really go move. We cannot proceed in our analysis against what we are measuring, we're assessing, evaluating. So I'm very much in agreement with your point of view. Sean, vis-a-vis you are a document management specialist. So trying to align this recommendation and this identification of reliable sources within use cases, from your perspective, what would be your recommendation?
Absolutely. So making sure that you closely align yourself with the technical folks of your organization, just to make sure that you have great requirements written down. You have your functional specifications and requirements documents taken care of in a planning phase before you begin to really dig into what available solutions are out there. It's very easy to take a look at the stats on paper and of various blockchains, but to work then very closely with the technical folks of those blockchains so that you could really get your very fine detailed questions answered. Like how many nodes do they have in the system? How many transactions can their blockchain solutions handle? So that you have your functional specifications, your technical specifications covered.
Thank you. David, from your specific use case.
Sure. So I would say that standards drive adoption. And the mechanisms by which those standards are created can either stifle creativity or they can enable and amplify creativity. So in terms of standards and ensuring that you are creating this set of criteria by which you're determining which blockchain you believe or which anything you believe is going to be most effective for you, having that standardization be at the level that furthers the way that you're looking at things and what you're trying to achieve in your organization, having those be at the right level is critical. So if you get too specific, you're going to curtail the sorts of creativity that you can apply and your own specific use case. But when they have a level of a base level that says, okay, it must be, I'll use the same term, scalable, but maybe it needs to also be discoverable. Maybe it needs to be able to connect to your existing directory services. Maybe it needs to be able to interact with your existing systems. Those sorts of standards will enable you then to apply your own sets of requirements to whatever blockchain environment or blockchain solution that you have. I mean, if you have I won't make you raise your hand again, but I think everybody in here probably has a phone. And unless you have one of Michael Promper's phones, you're already using a Web 2 sort of environment. So all the information that you are using, you are already in a system that if it's going to move to a blockchain, it's going to need to have the capacity to interact with blockchain and move ahead from there. So one of your criteria may be interconnectivity with existing systems. Before we can get to a Web3 world, we're going to have to transform from our Web2 world. So I would say those standards, if it includes something like interaction, if it includes something like stability, if it includes something like, for example, scalability, to Eugene's point, those sorts of standardization criteria can create an environment where you can choose a blockchain solution that's going to meet your needs and therefore be able to allow you to apply your creativity and your hopes and dreams to what it is that you want to do with blockchain instead of how you may need to conform to that particular solution.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Eugene?
Yeah, I didn't tell you this, but my first career was an auditor. Perfect. I worked for Coopers and Lybrand, my first job. I must say that permissionless blockchains are potentially a heaven for auditors, because each one has an explorer, and you can trace every single transaction or message. So I think it's more a matter of convenient tools to be built and developed for the auditor community other than the blockchain technology itself. I think you can imagine a set, for example, that would allow an auditor to really build from the raw data that is available to build some kind of comprehensive picture of what has this or that particular wallet has been doing, right? And in my opinion, eventually, most of the transactions will happen on-chain, and that allows incredible opportunities for verification, as long as we, run on secure networks in a secure way, which there will be a separate panel discussion about that tomorrow. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. I think actually that this whole theme about the role of auditing in the blockchain can be a theme for a specific session. Indeed, as you alluded to, if auditors don't need to discover transaction anymore because they are there in a mutable, relatively mutable ledger, if they don't need to reconcile anymore, what should they do? Should they all become code auditors? Should they go and analyze the availability of the smart contract or the software or the security? So I think that would be a very interesting conversation to have. But in order to conclude this, this discussion, Paul, let's try to identify what's around the corner. How do you envision the market to evolve, both from a point of view of the technology that is being utilized, as well also from the point of view of business having the ability to make use of it? How do you see the risk, opportunity, development, how do you see it?
How long do I have? So I think the key, the way I look at this is what the internet protocol did for communication. Distributed ledgers have the opportunity to do that for transactions, which is really to commoditize it and unify it, as a consistent mechanism. If you'd have gone to a telephone company in the mid-90s and said, hey, your competition right now, today, as of 2022, would be that nascent online bookseller and that DVD collection service, you'd have said, how? And really what happened was communication became a commodity and content became king. So Amazon and Netflix are joining, the telephone companies joined with the cable companies because content became key rather than communication, which is what you used to pay for. In the financial services, if you look at any product that you can invest in any region of the country, in the world, they all have their own dedicated infrastructure. So the big banks and institutions, part of their benefit is that they can plug into those multiple infrastructures on your behalf. But that's where all the inefficiency, that's where all the friction is. So the idea of being able to unify that in the financial services is certainly aspirational, but it lends itself to, and we've got interest from other use cases like supply chain and document management, records management, voting, where you can actually unify transactions. There's this huge, huge opportunity because it's going to simplify the world, You don't think about the internet protocol when you're using your phone today. You just say, I need to go somewhere, I need to do something, I need to connect. Well, now imagine a network of networks that says, I need to establish a transacting relationship, and then I can transact. So that's the legacy world. I think the exciting thing, I have questions on crypto and I have questions on NFTs, but the metaverse is its own digital economy with digital assets. So it is potentially a real economy in a different environment. And so that could lead the way if the legacy world doesn't follow or adopt this technology. But those are the areas where I think the potential is going to be huge.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sean, what is your point of view?
Okay, all right. So I think about where we've been and where we're going. And in the beginning, we had blockchains, which were just these monolithic chains, and they were all separate and everything. And now we're starting to see that there are platforms that chains are coalescing around, where you have a base level of technology which chains are built from. Things like graphene technology, which is the foundation for blockchains like Hive, Steam, Pure Plays, and others. But you also have Ethereum, which has many of its own chains built on Ethereum technology. So in the future, we're going to start to see an even more connectedness between these foundational technologies. So we're going to start to see more of a ubiquitous network of blockchains. I think that it's important for the transportability of assets. So you have NFTs. Like, let's say you have a customer coming to an NFT store and they buy some artwork, but in the future, are they really going to know or even care which chain they're on? If they can port that NFT from one chain to another, it might even be totally transparent to them. So I think that is definitely the direction that we're headed in terms of blockchain technology.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So metaverse interpretability. David, what's around the corner?
Sure. So there we go. So I touched on this before, and I'm just going to say that I agree with our other panel members here in that even a nascent technology like blockchain has a continuum. And what you've seen is, interestingly, early on you had these silos of data. You had these individual chains that unless you were in their ecosystem, you really weren't interacting amongst them. I think what's going to happen next is you're going to find that where the gravity of the market is and where the momentum begins to push is interconnecting these various systems in a mechanism that can be secure, that can bring agencies, government agencies, enterprise organizations, and other, regardless of size, other businesses and information systems that want to take part in this transformational technology of blockchain but don't want to create more silos. They're going to want an interconnection and mechanisms by which they can interact from some of these purpose-driven chains and their own purpose-driven chain, but all in a relatively friction-free, secure environment. So I think looking around the corner, you're going to see the silos, the ones that are purely siloed, are going to become less attractive, and those that have the ability to interact and interop, not just with each other, that will be important, but with the existing systems that we have. Those will be the ones that find momentum and spread.
Excellent, excellent prediction. Very, very interesting, and very much agree with that.
Just a couple of things to add. If we're talking about what's coming, I think we will see consolidation, major consolidation, and the networks that are not compliant with the industry requirements, again, that would make it possible for them to be mass adopted are going to die out. Or if they have some excellent features that other networks don't have, we're talking about a consolidation with some other network. And that's a fundamental process. I think it's going to happen. And another thing I would mention, it was in part referred to when we talk about metaverses, is composability. An ability for a user to transfer value or assets from one a network to another. And that's coming in gaming first, I think, but it's also going to come in a variety of other areas, including like healthcare and including DeFi. So composable NFTs is a term you're going to hear about more in the coming future. But overall, I must say, this is an extremely exciting industry and extremely exciting processes. So I'm very pleased and very happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for all your insight and prediction. Hopefully next year we'll be here again and we will verify and validate this prediction vis-a-vis what has happened. So thank you very much. A round of applause for our panel member. Thank you so much.